Hi, I'm Carrie Jagger, and I work for OSU Extension in Morrow County, Ohio. And I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Farm Science Review. I'm here to talk to you today about growing garlic. It's one of my passions and one of my hobbies that I've started to do over the last few years. And it kind of works well with my job because I learn as I go, and then I can teach folks about growing garlic. Why would you want to grow garlic? Well, it has great flavor. It adds great flavor to any dish that you might eat. It's got health benefits, antioxidant effects, antibiotic effects. It helps reduce cholesterol, and it can also help in reduction of your blood pressure levels. We're going to go through the steps of growing some awesome garlic today. We're going to talk about soil, amending our soil, fertilizer requirements, good bulb and seed stock source, different types of garlic, when to think about planting your garlic, water requirements, mulching it, scape removal, harvesting and storage, and then marketing our garlic. So soil is the foundation, and you want to think about the type of soil that you have, and then we're going to talk about our soil. So there are different soil types. As you can see here on this soil triangle, maybe if you took an ag class in high school, you learned about the soil triangle. And there are different types: clay, silty clay, clay loam, sandy clay, and loam soils. And garlic kind of likes these loam, silt loam, sandy loam type soils to grow in. It will grow in clay, but it might not grow to be as big. And then if that clay holds water and doesn't let it drain very well, that can be a problem as well. So if you're not sure what kind of soil type you have, you can do this jar test. You take a mason jar and you fill it about halfway full with dry soil from the area that you're going to plant your garlic in. And you fill the rest with water and a little bit of dish soap. You shake this up and let it sit for 24 hours. And then it will separate out. Your sand will fall to the bottom because it is the biggest particle, and then your silt, and then your clay. And then that will show you kind of a percentage of what you have growing in, what you have as far as soil type in your garden. Next is you want to think about a soil test. So when you're growing garlic or any type of vegetables or fruits or really anything for that matter, you want to think about doing a soil test for that area. So this year I'm growing garlic in a different area, and it's completely different soil from what I've grown in the past, and it's been yard for a long time. So I wanted to take a soil test of that, and it did come back with a really high pH. Garlic doesn't really like you kind of want a neutral pH for that, between 6 and 7. So I'm going to have to amend my soil with some amendments. And if you look down here, it kind of shows you on this chart, I'm in the high range in some of this stuff. I'm in the good range in some, and then I'm in medium and then in low. So these are adjust or look at adjusting. I really don't have to adjust a whole lot, maybe manganese, but I don't have to add a whole lot. According to the chart down here at the bottom, it tells you should add. So once you have your soil test, you can start thinking about amending your soil to get it where it needs to be for that garlic to grow. And then on that, you'll see pH. pH tells you if your soil is acidic or alkaline. 6.7 or 6 to 7 is ideal. If the pH is low, below 6, you would add lime to raise it. If the pH is high, above 7, you would add sulfur to raise it. So in my case, I have to add sulfur because I believe mine was like 7.6. N, P, and K are primary nutrients. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then calcium, magnesium, and sulfur are secondary nutrients. There are 7 micronutrients that we might need to think about if the soil test says so: zinc, manganese, iron, chlorine, copper, and molybdenum. Plants can have deficiencies or an excess of these nutrients. Both can cause problems. The old adage that more is better doesn't always ring true when it comes to nutrients. So fertilizing garlic. Garlic is a heavy feeder. It does require high levels of nutrients. So you want to apply 1/2 of the recommendation at planting to aid in your root development. Root development is very, very important before winter sets in. And then the second application when growth resumes in the spring and plants are 4 to 6 inches tall. If a third application is needed, you want to do it 6 weeks after the first spring application. And then your typical fertilizer application rates for various situations, 1 to 1.25 pounds of triple 19 fertilizer for 100 square feet of bed, and 1.5 to 2 pounds of triple 12 fertilizer per 100 square feet of bed. And then 2 pounds of urea, which is nitrogen only, per 500 square foot of bed, and 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre if you're growing it on a per acre basis. So you want to think about getting your seed stock. If you're going to plant garlic this fall, you might have trouble finding seed stock, or you might be able to find somebody local that can help you out, but you can order it through the mail. You can order it local. You want to make sure that it's a reputable company or grower. You want to ask the grower some questions if you're buying it. Have you had any problems with disease in the past? Have you had any problems with mites? So those are some things that you want to think about. Garlic bloat nematode. Onion maggots. A lot of those things can affect garlic the same as they can affect onions. And then you want to know when to expect it. When I first started growing garlic, I ordered mine in the spring with everything else, and it didn't show up until way later in the season. And I called and asked where it was, and they said, you won't get it in the mail until it's time to plant it, which was towards fall. There are different types of garlic. There's hard neck, soft neck, and then there's elephant garlic, which is really not a true garlic. For hard neck, it produces and bulbils. This is a scape, comes up, and we'll talk more about those later. And then these are bulbils, and these can fall off and become garlic plants as well. They're seeds. Hardneck produces few, but they're larger cloves. They're more uniform sized cloves, and the clove skins are easier to remove. There is more variation in taste and characteristics. The different varieties of hardneck, some of them have a stronger taste, some of them have a more mild taste, and generally shorter storage life than soft necks. And they're really adapted to cool growing conditions. Soft neck varieties, they generally do not form scapes. They have many cloves per bulb. As you can see in this picture, there's cloves all around the outside, and then there's smaller cloves. They have a tighter clove and skins, and this is sometimes harder to remove. They have a generally longer storage life than hardnecks. They grow better in warmer climates than hardnecks. They can be planted mechanically. They have a flexible stalk which allows for braiding. So if you're thinking about braiding garlic and using that as a market tactic, you'll want to think about using soft neck. Most commercial garlic is of this type just because of its longer storage life. Next is elephant garlic. It's related to the leek family. The culture is similar to garlic, and it does also produce 4 to 6 large cloves per bulb, and it has a very mild flavor. When do we want to think about planting our garlic? Well, we need to plant it in the fall, 4 to 6 weeks before freezing temperatures, and I usually shoot for between Halloween and Thanksgiving. And I've planted it closer to that Thanksgiving side before, and it's done just fine. Spring planting is possible. However, spring planted garlic should be stored under refrigeration for at least 8 weeks prior to planting it, and it should be set as early in the spring as possible. Sometimes that could be hard for our area as we get lots of rain in the spring, and that could slow us down getting in the field to plant our garlic or in the garden. You break your bulbs into cloves no more than a few days before planting. And avoid planting doubles. Doubles are when your cloves are grown together. You don't want to plant those cloves if they've grown together. And try not to damage the cloves when they're breaking them, because this could inhibit the germination of them. And then you want to select large, healthy cloves from large, healthy bulbs. And this is one from my garden. It's a nice, large, healthy clove, and it was from a nice, large, healthy bulb. And you can kind of see how big that is in comparison to my hand. So when we start thinking about planting our garlic, we want to plant our cloves vertically with the basal root plate down. This is the basal root plate, and as you can see here, there's little roots starting to come out in that, so you want to be real careful not to damage those as you're planting and breaking those apart. You want to plant 2 to 3 inches deep. Space those cloves a nice 4 to 6 inches apart in the row, and it kind of depends on the cultivar. Maybe some cultivars need more room than 4 to 6 inches. I plant German Extra Hardy, and I've always done 4 to 6 inches, and they seem to do really well with that. Planting can be a single row, a double row raised beds, or dense beds, 8 inches apart in dense beds. And then if planted in rows, I like to go 12 to 18 inches apart. This gives me room to walk down between the rows when I'm picking scapes. And then it also gives me plenty of room when I start to dig that garlic in July. Water requirements. Garlic requires 1 inch of water per week during the spring vegetative growth period. So if we're lucky and we're getting good rains in the spring, we may not have to water. But if we're not getting good rains in the spring, you want to pay attention to that and make sure that you're supplementing with some irrigation water. You irrigate as indicated by weather. Like I said, irrigate until the bulbs reach your desired size, 2 to 3 mature scales around the surrounding bulbs. And then don't irrigate once the tops begin to dry, because that means the garlic is finalizing its growth and it's getting ready to dig, and you don't want to water it when you're getting ready to dig it. For mulching, you can use clean straw, leaf compost, mulched leaves and grass clippings, and you want it about 4 inches deep. Mulching, I always mulch in the fall when I plant. I always it kind of gives me peace of mind that I've put that garlic to bed for the winter. And then I leave it on all through the winter and all through the garlic growing season. The garlic will push right up through that straw. It's never really seemed to hurt it. And then it helps keep the weeds down as well. And weed and pest management is very, very important. As you can see in this picture, there's quite a few weeds growing in there, and that can inhibit your garlic bulb size. Weeds can be a major issue for garlic production if you let them get out of control. Both cool and warm season weeds can be an issue. The weed impact is direct competition. It does increase a risk for diseases. It slows the drying of foliage in advance of harvest. And then it can make your harvesting more difficult, because you got to wade through the weeds and you got to worry about pulling the garlic up out of the weeds as well. So for weed management, you can do cultural control with cultivation, but if you've put straw down, you really shouldn't need to do this. And then it must be shallow, because you don't want to risk damaging your garlic roots or bulbs. And then hand weeding. I'll hand weed because the straw isn't 100% effective. I do get a weed here and there, and I'll go in and just pull those out. And then, like I said before, mulching is very, very helpful. Now, if you don't have any type of mulch around your garlic, and flame before those weeds get real big. Flaming is a great option for little tiny weed seedlings. It'll kill those. And then there are some herbicides available. Just make sure that they're listed for use with your garlic. Disease management, you want to rotate your garlic planting locations every year, and don't plant back in that area for 2 to 3 years. So maybe put some other garden crops in there, or use cover crops. This would be a good opportunity to put a little pollinator garden in, and it would help that soil health. And then you could go back after 2 to 3 years and plant your garlic. Use only disease-tested cloves if purchasing seed stock. Check all cloves saved for seed stock carefully for disease signs and symptoms. There's some really good fact sheets out there from some universities that have great pictures of garlic diseases. And then you'll want to soak your cloves in advance of planting. So 10% commercial bleach solution, 1 part bleach and 9 parts water, or you can use oxidate dip, 32 ounces per 25 gallons of water. And if your garlic is dirty, you'll want to soak it in smaller quantities, because as that water gets dirty, it's not going to sanitize your garlic as well. And you'll want to soak that for between 16 and 24 hours. And then you want to plant right out of your soak. So you can drain that soak off and then just go right out, have your bed ready, and start planting. This helps with any disease pathogens, bacteria, fungal pathogens. And then if you're worried about mites or anything like that, we'll talk about that as we go on. Here's just some different diseases to look for in garlic, or that could be a problem. There's white rot. The leaves will decay at the base, they'll turn yellow, and they'll die, and the roots will rot. And then the controls, you want to start with clean stock and clean soil. A lot of these pathogens are soil-borne. There's basal rot. It has pre-emergence decay of cloves and seedlings, and the stem plates and leaves may decay as well. And again, this is a rotation one. As you see, a lot of these are rotation issues. So if you rotate on a good basis, then you may not end up with these diseases. Other ones are blue mold, botrytis neck rot. It's also known as dry rot. Basal rot. You can see it's kind of rotted at that basal plate. Embellished skin blotch of garlic. This one I've had this on my garlic a few times, and it just affects the skin. It makes the skin look bad. So if you're going to sell it, be as interested in buying a bulb of garlic that has some black skin on it. They want those nice, crisp, white skins on them. So if it's got some of this black blotch on it, the skin blotch, it may not be as marketable. Next are some pests that you look for: bulb mites, thrips, wireworms, and onion maggots. And the management option for mites: plant clean seed. Hot water treatment of seed garlic is effective, but it can decrease your germination. So put your seed in water heated to 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 20 minutes, or 140 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes. Soak the seed for 24 hours in 2% soap, not detergent, and 2% mineral oil prior to planting. You can also dust your bulbs with sulfur. Mild mite infestations are often mitigated by the process of drying bulbs before storage, and then rotate out of alliums for at least 2 to 4 years and control wild allium species in the vicinity. So mites can survive on the residues in a number of crops. So plant only in fields where crop residue is thoroughly decomposed, and avoid planting alliums directly after brassicas, corn, grain, or grass cover crops. And I've always used wheat for a cover crop, and I've actually used some brassicas as well. And this year I noticed that I had some bulb mite damage, and I 100% believe it's because of my choice of cover crops. So now that I know that, I'll probably be using buckwheat and some clovers from now on for my cover crops for garlic. The bloat nematode, the symptoms are that the plants are stunted and they die prematurely. And this is a real problem as of late. I've talked to our diagnostic lab, and she said she's seen this a lot. So be real careful when you're buying garlic to make sure that you're not bringing the bloat nematode into your patch. For scape removal, I talked about scapes earlier. This gives you a positive yield response if the scapes are removed. So you want to make sure you're removing them. You cut those scapes when they reach the coil stage, and I'll show that in a minute. And that's usually around May in Ohio. And then bulbils are formed at the top of the scape or on the stem. Bulbils may be used to propagate garlic because they are the seed. So in this picture, these are your bulbils on the end of your scape. And if you let it get to this stage, it's really not good because it's taking energy to form this away from your garlic bulb. So your bulbs won't get as big underground because they're putting energy into this unnecessary pieces of the plant. So when your scapes start to get this nice curl on them, you can pinch those off and you can eat them. They're very, very good in culinary dishes. They taste just like garlic, and you can stir fry them up with any kind of veggies. Here's another picture of some bulbils that I've opened up. Like I said, you can save these and plant them, and they will produce garlic plants. It takes a couple years to get a really nice one, but they will produce. And then on to harvesting. So garlic bulb harvest in Ohio is between late June and early August, depending on the cultivar that you have growing. Harvest decisions are based on the drying stage. So you want to dig your garlic when 1/2 to 3/4 of the lower leaves are brown. 5 to 6 upper leaves should still be green. You don't want it completely brown. If left in the ground too long, the wrappers on the garlic will start to break down, and this leaves a naked bulb, especially on the hardneck types, and that's typically what we're growing around here in Central Ohio. This may cause the bulb to start rotting, and then it's not marketable, and you may not even be able to plant it or eat it. Digging garlic is the method used by home gardeners. Use care to avoid bruising or cutting your bulbs as you're digging it. I like to use a potato fork when I dig mine, or a fork spade, some call them that. You want to shake the soil off, leaving the roots and tops intact, but be careful when you're shaking the soil off not to beat that bulb against the ground, or it could bruise it. This is a bountiful garlic harvest that I had several years ago. And then these are just some pictures I talked about being harvested too late. So it was harvested too late, and you can see that the skins are all gone on that. So there's really nothing on there protecting it. The outer skins, it still has a skin on the clove itself, but the outer skin is all gone. You wouldn't be able to market that very easily. And then here's some that's in storage. They've got these on crates separated by their variety. And then this is a common method I think used is hanging. But if you go online and you Google drying garlic, you can get all kinds of ideas. I've talked to folks that use old bread racks. I've talked to folks that string up snow fence and they'll drop the garlic down through the snow fence to dry. So there's all kinds of creative ways that you can dry your garlic. But you want to make sure that you're drying it and curing it in a shady, well-ventilated area. You can bundle and hang it, place it in loose mesh bags, place it on trays, or hang it in mesh fence. You want to provide good air movement. It's critical. Forced air can be helpful. It needs that air movement in there. And then curing is complete when the stems are dry, and this generally takes 2 to 4 weeks after digging it. I usually wait about a month, and then I go in, and once it's cured and dried, you remove the tops. You leave about 1 inch of the stem, and you cut the roots to a 1/2 inch. For storing, depending on your type, your variety of garlic, it can be stored for up to 12 months at 30 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit and at 60 to 70% relative humidity. Many cultivars will store up to 7 months at 55 to 58 degrees and at 55 to 60% relative humidity. We're going to talk a little bit about marketing garlic. You can sell garlic bulbs, and those prices range from $1 to $2 per bulb or higher markets. Sometimes they sell lower as well. And there's an interest in gourmet garlic, especially the hardneck types. There's some with purple skins, and folks really, really like those types. You can sell the scapes as we talked about earlier. You can sell green garlic right out of the garden. I've sold it and it sells well too. And then you can sell garlic sprouts. There are some value added products. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're gonna braid garlic, you wanna use the soft neck variety. You can make wreaths or swags. You can dry it and then sell it as a powder. You can sell it as infused salts or pickled garlic. But if you're thinking about selling these, you need to talk to your local health department and do the research about how to properly package it and how to properly label it so that you're following the legal codes in Ohio for selling that. It is labor intense and labor extensive. So you hand crack your seed cloves, you hand plant it, basil root plate down. You could plant it with mechanically, but if you're not planting acres of it, I don't think a planter would be feasible. You need to hand weed it. If it's got weeds, you need to remove the scapes from the stems, as we mentioned. You hand harvest it and then you hang it for curing, and then you hand clean it and you remove the excess stem and roots, and then you hand sort it for seed stock. So you are handling it a lot, but it's something that I've enjoyed doing. I kind of started it as a little hobby and it's just grown a little bit every year. My motto is kind of like this. I share some, I sell some, I eat some, and I save some. And I always try to save about half to plant back in the garden. Now, hardiness zone, you might see this on vegetables and plants when you're planting. I used to live here in Knox County in this corner, so I was still in zone 5B. Some of Morrow County is 5B and the rest of Morrow County is 6A to 6B. And that's 6A, 6B is this lighter green that's down here in Southern Ohio and up here. So when you're thinking about zones, look at the zone map for Ohio and see where you live to see if you fall under that 5B, 6A, or 6B when planting plants. And that's your hardiness zone for how cold it gets. And again, I'm Carrie Jagger, and this is my email address. And if you have any kind of garlic questions, or you would like those fact sheets that I mentioned earlier about the disease that show the good pictures of the diseases, feel free to email me and I can get you any kind of information on growing garlic. And I thank you for joining us today for the 2020 virtual